How do you make sure you never relapse? That's the topic of today's video. Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kevin, and here at The Rational Eater, I am making eating disorder recovery simple. Today I am reviewing a video by Megsy Recovery. It's called ED Relapse Risk, Accidental, Intentional, or a Rebrand. I'm not sure about the rebrand part, but I'm going to talk about the risk of relapse and how to avoid it. If you want to overcome binge eating or bulimia, then check out the links in the box below. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss a video. All right, let's take a look at the video.
I'd say I've faced a couple of pretty big relapse risks. Yeah, I've had to be really careful to protect my recovery.
Making sure you don't relapse is a really important thing because you don't want to do all that work and then go back. I've done that a couple of times. I think I was in quasi-recovery. I hadn't really recovered. It's just that there were certain conditions in my life that made it really hard to relapse. And then when those conditions appeared, I went back to my old behaviors. How can you minimize the risk of relapse? It's really important to remember why you started this process in the first place. Was it health? Was it aesthetics? Was it a weight loss goal? Was it because you wanted more control over your life? Is it because you didn't want to deal with this problem for the rest of your life? Was it a sense of helplessness? What was it? What were the original reasons? And keep those reasons in mind. It's also really important not to go back to your old ways. What were the habits that got you into this mess in the first place? What were the beliefs and the thoughts that you had? You can't go back to where you were. You can't go through this process, get to the end and say, mission accomplished. No, it's not accomplished. You need to close the door. Maintain that whole foods diet. Remember your reasons. Keep all those good habits. Don't do anything that would compromise that recovery.
To restriction. So if you're sat there thinking, oh my God, all I want is food all the time, it can make you think like, oh, well, what's wrong with me? Like, I'm so greedy.
I like that she mentions the word greedy because I think a lot of disordered eaters think that they're greedy. A lot of binge eaters believe this. They think that all this food they're eating is a sign of greed. I thought that too for a while. Oh, this is so greedy. How could I be eating all this food? I get where it's coming from, but it's also, you're trying to shame yourself into recovery. You can't do that. You can't use shame to produce the behavior that you want.
Whereas it isn't for him. Like, I am not other people. I'm in a different body. I'm on a different path. And that's not for me.
In this case, Meg is referring to anorexia or orthorexia recovery when you need to eat a lot, rebound hyperphagia, where you have this enormous appetite. That's what she's referring to here. And I'm using it in a different context. But when you're a binge eater and you're eating all this extra food, you're not greedy. It's just really unhealthy.
I've honestly just had to ignore it this year and just eat anyway because...
Eat anyway and do the opposite. Depends on which kind of disorder you're recovering from. But in recovery, you need to do the opposite. You're going to have a thought, an urge, and it's really important that you do the opposite. If you keep doing the same thing, if you keep following the urge, you're going to get the same result. You have to go this way when your brain wants to go that way. That's how you start producing different behavior. And that's how you'll start reducing those urges too.
I don't know, I'm almost like fighting against my intuition, like all to make sure I don't lose my appetite.
In this case, she's referring to grief-induced anorexia. I think one of her pets died and she lost her appetite and she had to force herself to eat. That's what she's talking about here. Her brain says don't eat, and then she had to eat. So she did the opposite.
But to be honest, there's no such thing as an eating disorder golden ticket. Like, nobody effortlessly has an eating disorder.
When you're in recovery, you can't do things that people who have no history of eating disorders do. For example, let me give you a personal example here. When I recovered, I vowed I would never follow any diet again. Any of the main diets, whether it's South Beach, is anybody doing that anymore? Vegetarian, vegan, keto, FODMAP, I don't need to do FODMAP, fruitarian, you name it. There's so many different diets out there. I told myself I would never cut out a food group again because that's when my problems all started. That's when my orthorexia started. It started when I cut out entire food groups and I said, this is the healthiest way to eat. Today, I'm plant-based, but I still include some meat and dairy. My protein bars have whey protein. I eat yogurt once in a while. I just had chicken this last weekend. Family member made barbecue chicken. I said yes, ate the chicken. My point is I give myself that flexibility and I'll never go full vegan. If I didn't have a history of eating disorders and really bad behavior around food, I might consider going vegan. But because I have that history, it's not an option anymore.
The eating disorder starts looking attractive as like a friend or some security, a way to cope, a way to like numb or escape your emotions.
That's exactly what EDs are. They are ways to cope. They are ways to cope with anxiety, insecurity, stress, boredom, lack of stimulation, dissatisfaction with life. How long have humans been using chemicals to alleviate negative emotions? We've been using alcohol and opium and tobacco for the longest time, and many other drugs to alter our consciousness. And that's what you're doing when you're binge eating, or you're purging, or you're just overeating. You're using that to alleviate some feeling that you don't like. It is a cope. It is a coping mechanism. I don't think urges can purely explain this kind of behavior. You don't binge because you like the food. You binge because it produces a certain effect. You like the effect. It produces endorphins, serotonin. It calms you down. It makes you relax. Of course, when you come back to reality, you have a different problem. But while you're doing it, it feels great.
She calls it your eating disorder DVD, like the thoughts you get that are eating disorder thoughts, your eating disorder mindset, or your DVD playing in your head.
Her psychologist refers to the DVD in her head. I think that's a cool analogy. The only problem is DVDs are kind of an anachronism in 2021. Most Gen Zers don't even know what a DVD is. I'm old enough to remember DVD. I'm old enough to remember tapes. Remember tapes? You had to like rewind it. Anyway, I use the word script. When you run a certain script in your brain, you get a certain result. Like this happens, and then the script runs in your head, and then you binge or you overeat or whatever. One of the things you'll have to do in recovery is rewrite that script. I remember back in the day, I used to burn music to DVDs. Can you believe that? That was so long ago. And when I wanted to add new music, I would have to burn it again, if that was possible. Some DVDs, you had to throw it out and then burn new music. Well, that's what you're doing in your head. You have to burn a new script. You have to burn new habits.
But I think it is your responsibility to not let that happen. Like, screen for your eating disorder DVD.
It is your responsibility. It's your responsibility to fix this problem. I don't know how this problem arose. Everybody has a different story, and I hate to say it's your fault. It's your fault. That's not gonna help. But it is your responsibility to fix it now. It doesn't matter how you got here. The fact is you're here, and what are you gonna do in the future? That is your responsibility.
Recognize when the thoughts are playing. Like, if I would get an eating disorder thought, I'll be like, oh my God, getting an eating disorder thought. And then I have to like eject that thought by doing opposite actions. In the long term, all it's gonna up, and you'll become more detached from your life, more isolated, more consumed with thoughts of food.
Overeating, binge eating, or in some cases restriction, if you have a history of anorexia, these can be short-term fixes. They're a nice cope. You do it because it makes you feel good now, but it compromises your health and your life in the long term. And to me, that is the definition of compulsive behavior or an addiction, is that you are maximizing short-term gain and you are maximizing long-term loss, right? You're getting all the pleasure today, but then what are you losing tomorrow and next week and next month?
Whatever the eating disorder DVD tells me to do, I have to do the opposite. Because even if the eating disorder does start looking tempting, like those are all just short-term fixes, like a way to just feel better now, or just to avoid feeling now, or just to escape how horrible this feels today.
One thing you need to do is start thinking about the long-term consequences of what you're doing. If I do this today, what are the long-term consequences? If I did this every day for a month, what would be the consequences? Quit thinking about just today. What happens when you repeat it 100 times, 1,000 times? And start making decisions today that benefit you now and in the future, so that the future self thanks you. Remember, urges and cravings, they always pass. They come and go. And it's really important that you don't overestimate the size and the severity of these urges. They can't hurt you. All they can do is make you feel a little agitated. That's it. That's the only thing they can do. They can make you feel a little uncomfortable. You feel like you're missing out. You feel like something is missing. You should be doing something and you're not. And that's how urges make you do things that you don't want to do. But that's all they are. They're not physical things. That's all urges are. They're just thoughts. It's just energy in your brain. You can't even see it. And yet they're so powerful, they can lead you down a road you don't want to go down.
And I can think like, oh, I'll just do it in moderation, like I'll just be careful of it and I won't get too obsessed. Like,
how many times have you said, I'm only gonna eat a little, I'm only gonna eat a little bit, and then what happens? You binge. Okay, I did that so many times. I overestimated how much control I had. I overestimated my recovery. I was very early in recovery, and I thought, oh, I can pack my refrigerator, my cabinets with all of these delicious foods, and I couldn't. I wasn't at that point yet. Don't fool yourself. If you're early in recovery, don't take chances. Don't overestimate your self-control.
You know, healthy behaviors are not healthy if you develop an unhealthy obsession with them.
This is one of my favorite one-liners of the whole video. Healthy behaviors are not healthy if you obsess about them. That was me. That's orthorexia. You take something that's healthy, like removing processed food, and then it becomes this obsession that takes over your life, and you don't have any energy or attention for anything else. That's probably one of the worst things about EDs, whether it's orthorexia or binge eating, is that so much attention and energy is over here, and it should be over here. You're not paying attention to relationships. You're not paying attention to your career. You're not becoming the best version of yourself. You're spending all this time repeating the same cycle over and over and over. Healthy food is great. I love healthy food, but it's not the most important thing in my life, and I hope it never is. I don't obsess the way I used to. I don't look at nutrition facts as closely as I used to. I'm making small changes over time, but that's it. I don't overanalyze things. I don't use apps to look at my macros. If you do that and it keeps you on track, great. I just don't do it anymore.
At the same time, it's out there. Like, we're not going to recover into a world where we're never triggered by anything.
Here's the thing about triggers, and I talked about this in my unpopular opinions video, is that triggers matter less than you think. Because the thing is, you could eliminate triggers and then another one arises. It's like that game they used to play, or maybe they still play it at arcades, whack-a-mole, and it's like you're trying to hit all the moles coming out of the ground, and like you hit one and two more come up. That's kind of what triggers are. You can't get rid of triggers. The only thing you can change is the way you respond to them. You cannot live in a trigger-free world.
And now I'm just aware of it. Like, I'm getting advice that for me is eating disorder advice, and it's packaged as something helpful and healthy. And
let me give you the context here. She's reading a book and she doesn't give us the title. And it says that you should limit your dairy consumption in order to improve your chances of conception. If diet advice and nutrition advice is a potential trigger and a potential roadblock in your recovery, then don't read it. In fact, during recovery, I don't recommend anybody read or watch videos about nutrition and weight loss and diet. You probably know too much about that. You can come back to it later. In this case, Meg is not looking at nutrition advice, and she's trying not to read these books because it could interrupt your recovery. She doesn't want to read things that say, don't eat this, don't eat that, don't eat this, and I totally understand that. However, you should come to a point where you can incorporate new knowledge. I'm always incorporating new knowledge, and I'm using that knowledge to modify my diet, gradually, not overnight changes here. But I read stuff and I say, that's pretty good. Maybe I should make this change, or maybe I should add this. Maybe I should cut out this. There's nothing wrong with that, but if you feel fragile and you're still in that fragile state of recovery, then don't read it. It's not worth it. Remember, your recovery is more important than weight loss and optimizing your diet.
as like an antidote to that book. It's called Food is Not Medicine by Dr. Joshua.
I haven't read this book, Food is Not Medicine. It sounds kind of interesting, but based on what I was reading on the Amazon page, I can kind of predict what it's going to say. It's going to say that weight is not a good predictor of health, and there is an argument to be made for that. But what you don't want to do is fall into what I call diet nihilism, meaning you ignore all diet advice, you just eat whatever, you don't care about science, you don't upgrade your diet, you dismiss all nutrition research because it's not very good. And the truth is, most nutrition research isn't very good. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't stop learning. It doesn't mean you shouldn't stop making small changes. It doesn't mean you shouldn't be curious anymore. That's what I call diet nihilism. I went through that stage myself. I said, I'm not going to read anything about nutrition, I'm just gonna eat whatever, we're all gonna die, you only live once, I don't care anymore. Then I came to my senses and I realized that no, nutrition matters and the science is evolving. The key is to make gradual changes and only make changes when you have a lot of evidence to support that change. Small iterations, little experiments, I'm totally in favor of that. But don't read one book or one article or watch one TED Talk or something and completely change your diet based on that. Science evolves very slowly and your diet should too. If you eat a whole foods, plant-based diet that doesn't have a lot of flour, sugar, or industrial vegetable oils, you should be okay. I hope you found this video educational and entertaining. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my links below. If you liked this video, I'm sure you'll like one of the other videos that you see on the screen. Click one of them and I'll see you there. And as always, eat the way you're designed to.